Right. Uh, this test is done with a multimeter. Okay.
Multimeter eminent.
This is a tom tester who does the same function as a multimeter. A tom tester. This one you can clamp onto a wire and you can measure the current. Right now, we can use the tom tester because it has the function of everything. You can test voltage, multimeter. So yes, he's working like a multimeter. Right? He has only got extra things. You can clamp him around a nice conductor and he can tell you the average that flows in the conductor. Okay, so it's a fancy meter. Now, I normally don't give this because I know students, when they're done with it, they do serious karate. When they finish, Jackie Chan cannot even do like weekend. And you need right now. Coming back, how is this test done and how do you do it? So, because this is the consumer point of control, right? We then place the 1 point of the meter on that F point. Okay, so we can clamp it now because I have a crocodile clamp. Okay. And then I can go to all my sockets, outlets, my stove outlet, where all the earth conductors are. I mean, just for the continuity. Okay. Now, then the meter will give me a 0, 1,5. Now, you go through that, but if it exceeds 0, then you prefer to take 8.1. Okay. Now, that was an isolator. So that isolator might have a bigger breaker that it comes. Then you go to that breaker, you see the temperature, then you look at the table, you can see. Now, if it's the socket, you go into, you then do the same thing. You go to the temperature, you know the sockets are coming from a 15 amp breaker. So you check on the 15 amp, you get it. You get the maximum resistance. Now, remember guys, if you do this test in an installation, your installation will not be as small as this board. Even your house, your breaker may be sitting in the kitchen, but you have to go to all the rooms where the sockets and the lights are. You get it? Yes. So you need a longer wire. Now normally what we do is we take a coil of wire and we attach it to the one lead of the chassis. So we take a screw, connect it, we tie up that, and then we put that on the other point of the conductor, or that whole coil in here, and then we walk with the tester because you cannot leave the tester. So you can't put it on this one, and then you walk around with everything, but you cannot see what the meter says. So the meter should be by you. You get it?
Yes, sir.
Now, before doing the test, when you put a coil of wire, remember, we spoke about this. Wires has a resistance. And because it's a coil, the length of that coil is long. So, if it's a coil is normally 100 meters. That's how long a coil is. So, obviously, 100 meters is long. If you uncoil it now, you go out of the coil. You get it? With that coil. Okay, now, how do I do it? I first measure the resistance of the coil. In other words, the 2 points of the coil I put on the meter. I write it down so that when I get a measurement with my meter, I subtract the resistance of the coil, then I have the actual resistance.
Oh, I see.
Because some of your rooms will be far from the TV. Right? Some houses and some buildings are tall and very big. So you have to go away from the TV, all the way to the last room. Huh? It might be 30, 40 meters later. You get it? Now, therefore you need a coil. Okay? So you have to first measure the resistance of the coil, remember it. Write it down. Don't keep it in your head, you will forget it. Then later on you find what was that resistance? Okay. You want to subtract now. You forgot about it. So you have your paper, you write it down on the paper. And then when you get the actual reading, you subtract and then you write down the balance on the sheet. You don't put that one with the coil because then that resistance might be wrong. Do you get it? So you have to first subtract it and then you write the actual balance is the actual reading. You get it? Don't mix up the two. Okay? Guys, these things are important. You have to remember. Now, I know if I was a student, I would have stand with a book and write down every word that Mr. Hendricks said. Okay. Because by the way, the extra coil of wire is not incense. That was part of my learning experience. So you will find that I include my 40 odd years of experience. My 45 years of experience I include into the training that you will not get out of the training and out of your manuals. And that you lose. You get it? Now, that is your second test. But for our purpose, it will be our first test. Okay. Now, once again, what is this test called? It's on that piece of paper if you cannot remember. I've given you that same paper. Sometimes I give these things for notes because some students don't think it's important. So you don't even have to keep it in here. You just repeat it because Kabir gave me the paper. Okay. Now, the second one we will be doing. Remember this one, the power is off. Okay, the first test. The only time now we will put the power is when we test the aggregate unit. Then we put the power. Right, so the second one we will do is the insulation resistance test. Right? Now the insulation resistance test is broken up into two. Okay? Now before getting there, the law says when you do insulation resistance, you must double the voltage on your meter. So for this test, we're not going to use the multimeter. Now, when you write down also the multimeter, remember guys, we write down DMN. D stands for dedicated multimeter. Right? Because your meter must be dedicated. In other words, your meter is calibrated. Therefore, it's a dedicated multimeter. If it's not dedicated, you will get different readings. Or the reading might fluctuate. You will not have a stable meter. But if it's a meter that is sent in regularly to be calibrated, you will have a dedicated multimeter. He will be dedicated to his work. Okay. So, therefore, hence we say DMN. So when we write there, we don't just write multimeter. We write dedicated multimeter. Then MN stands for multimeter. Okay, D stands for dedicated. Now, the second test is done with a negative. Now, remember the rule, double the voltage. So in other words, when we select here, we must select double the voltage. So if we do a single phase, where will the selection be? Well, we work with 230, so 230 times 2, we have 460. But the meter doesn't have 460. The meter has 250, 500, and 1,000. So where will we go?
500.
500. If we do three-phase, it's 400 plus 2, it's 800. Where will we go? Okay. To 1,000. Okay, now, let's first get the do's and the don'ts. The things we can and we cannot do in this. First of the things that we cannot do, we cannot have the power on. Right? So the power must be switch off. Okay? That's one of the important things that we shouldn't or cannot do. The don'ts. Okay? The second thing is every light should be disconnected. So otherwise, if you have globes when you will disconnect, you will take the globes out. If you have fluorescent lights, you should climb up there and disconnect the wire that goes to supply the ballast. If you have a stove, you unplug the stove. If you have a geyser, you disconnect. Right? Because of the fact that you are going to put double the voltage into the installation. If you forget to disconnect, you will blow up the customer's stuff. Okay? And when you leave, the lights that you came and found working is not working anymore. The stove that was working is not working anymore. The geyser is not working anymore. Now you might have charged the customer 1,000 rand for the job, but you pay out more because everything that was working is not working anymore. You see how crucial it is to remember this? So number one, power must be off. Number two, everything that is connected must be disconnected. You get it? Right, number three, the do's. All the breakers must be on. All the switches must be on. You must make sure that all the switches are on. You get it? All the breakers on, all the switches on. Also crucial, because if they are not on, then the test does not exceed the control point. Because the switch is where you control. Because there you cut the flow. But you want that measurement to go to the point. Right? If it's the light or whatever. Right? That's why you have to take out the globes. Right? That's how you're going to blow them, because all the switches are on. Okay, so those are the important things to remember. Number one, power must be off. You said nothing, and then when you do it, you blow my meat. No, power must be off. Number two, disconnect. Take the lights out. Disconnect the stove. If it's a stove that works like this, pull it out. Okay. Go to the keys and disconnect. Because you don't want to kill those elements. You get it? So those are important things. And then of course, all the breakers must be on, all the switches must be assembled. But it's crucial to remember. Now, the last thing that you have to know is that this test is not done with a multimeter, it is done with a magnet. Or it is done with the IRT test, insulation resistance test. The I stands for insulation, the R stands for resistance, and the T stands for test, IRT test. So, it's either a magnet or an IRT test. Okay? Now, then of course, like we said, we work with double the voltage. So if it's a single phase, we will go then to 500. Now the smallest selection on this thing is 250. And we use that one for the capacitor. Okay? So then we put it on 500 and then we switch on. Okay? Now, to see whether this meter is working, we will put these two leads together and see what it does. You see it's running, so it's working. Now, with the magnet you can also test ohms. What's the best ohms? Okay. So you can use it to do even the multiplication. Okay? But I prefer that you use the correct meter for each purpose. Because if you use it for the wrong purpose and you blow it, you could have blown your multimeter, but now you blow the mega. Now you need the mega is low. Right? So use the multimeter for everything else and use the mega just to use it. Okay? You don't want to use something because you can do it. Right. Now, how do you do the insulation resistance test? You know now you use a mega or an IRT tester for double the voltage. But the main breaker will switch off because we want more power. Because under normal circumstances there will be power limit. So if we do this, it's off. Okay? So we switch it off. And then we don't test on the top, on the bottom, because the bottom is where you supply. Right? You remember, everything goes in and then
Don't supply.
so your wires that comes from the outside to supply go to the top in and at the bottom out. Okay, so that is crucial. If you forget, just remember you put it here, you don't put it there, and then you let it out there. Okay. So this is called line and this is called load.
Yes.
Okay? And everything is like that. Now, the only people that put line in here and load there is the municipality. Because they are lazy. The power comes from the top to the bottom out of the cable. Because the cable always comes from the bottom up. And then they say this is the shortest route. And then from there they do. It works out nicely for you. Because now, when you do it from the top and then out, you must also go to the top there. Because all these also work the same way. Top in, bottom out. You get it? So they do this and then from there they just do it. And it works perfectly for you. But it's not how this thing was manufactured. There's a reason why we did it. He was made. So because when this thing is off, the power stays there. So those contacts should be installed. In the factory it was made it. That's why it's top in, bottom out. Okay? Remember that. Your switches also, top in, bottom out. Top in, bottom out. Right, so everything is made there. That switches. Okay? Now, if we do that, SAN says also, you must put the bridge wires over the earth linkage and switch it off. Because the earth linkage has resistance. Those of you who did it, you know that there is a coil inside of the earth linkage. Therefore you will pick up resistance. Okay? So you put them conductors as bridge wires. Okay? And then you can measure from the bottom. Because remember, this is the main breaker. The main isolator, he supplied the whole DB. So everything on there gets its power from there. That's why we switch everything on. Okay. Now, me, I am a bit lazy. So I will not do that. I will not put the wires there. I will just test from the bottom there and the bottom there. Now if I do that, if I do from the bottom here, I cover everything that is not going through the application. Like the stove, the lights and everything that doesn't go through the application when I test it. And then when I'm done there, I do my test here, I repeat it here at the bottom of the application to cover everything that has gone through the application. That is the geyser and all the socket outlets. Remember the dedicated socket outlet will be on this side of the application with the lights and the stove. Everything that's not going through the application will be between the main breaker and the application. However that is, remember what I'm telling you, you must listen to and do that. Not necessarily what you see other people do. So the person who hired this might have been, or he, I don't know, let me not go venture into that. Now,
Works on
normally, the lights and the stoves and everything that is not going through there is between the main breaker and the application. Remember, it's to make the distinction. In fact, that this is not going through. So everything that is then going through the application are on this side of the application. Okay? So all the socket outlets that is going through, that is not dedicated, they will go through on the other end of the application. Because from here you will feed them. Okay? So the application then is also a main breaker. Therefore you will find that the application and the main isolator also has 63 amps. You get it? Therefore, I do my test at the bottom there and cover everything that is not going through there. And then at the bottom there, everything that is going through there. Now, how is it done? I said it's broken up into two. Number one, the first test you do insulation resistance is the insulation resistance between conductors. Okay? Then the second one is the insulation resistance between conductors and irrespective whether it's single phase or three phase. You get it? So it's insulation resistance between conductors and then insulation resistance between conductors and you get it? So it's broken up into two parts. Okay. Now, the first one, between conductors, if it's a single phase, it will be between live and neutral. Those are the conductors, the main conductors. The one is feeding, the other one is returning. Okay? So, it will be between them. And then the second one will be between them and us. So if it's a three-phase installation, it will be all three phases will be there. And you're the neutral, right? So it will be a bigger breaker that covers all those other conductors, line 1, line 2, line 3, you get it? So then it will be between them and then between them and them. You get it?
So when you say them, is it negative and positive? When you say them, is it negative and positive then with the earth?
Negative and positive.
With earth.
So these two that I refer to now,
Them.
it's red and black. And red is positive and the negative is black. Okay, sure. So whether you want to say like he says now positive and negative, live and neutral is exactly the same. Okay, so the conductors will be those ones because they are the main role players. No? And then between them and the you get it's simple as that. So all I do is I put it there and then I check. You get it? The two. Now, if somebody holds this, you will find that if you can see here, if you do that, the needle is not moving. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is an analog meter. An analog meter works with the needle. Now, if that needle doesn't move out of the corner, it means there's no resistance. Because as soon as you pick up resistance, it will move. Because you saw that. As soon as you find there's resistance, the needle runs. You get it? So if any of the
Right.
conductors
So it's the
comes
force.
than each other, the needle will go. Now, remember also this. The needle can go. We should not exceed 1 meg.
Mega ohm.
Remember, because that page, that sense that you have in front of you says at least 1 mega ohm. Now, in other words, at least or least mean the lowest. So the lowest acceptable measurement is 1 meg, and 1 meg is there. So in other words, this can run out of there. So do you now see when he stands in here, it means it's way more than 1 meg. That's why we say infinity, because 1 meg is 1 million. So already is a lot. You get it? So if the needle picks up resistance, it will move. Sam says it shouldn't move past the one. It should stop at least there. Because that is the least acceptable. Because that's what Sam says. At least 1 mega. Okay? So now, because the thing has moved, don't go now and say the thing is wrong. As long as it doesn't go past that one. Yeah? Can you see the one?
Yes, I can't see the one below.
But you see, there's the one. The one is just past the middle. You find the one. So, in other words, when you test and the needle doesn't move out of that corner, don't go now and say something is wrong with this. Yeah? Because I know in your mind, he must move if you measure. Yeah? So if it doesn't move, it means it's perfect. You get it? Because it says that if he's in the corner, he's more millions. You get it? Because if he moves towards one, he moves down maybe 2 million, 1 million. If he's there between one and the corner, it will tell you that he's over 50 million. You get it? Please do understand it because it's important. Because when you do ohms, you know your meter must move. When you do ohms, to give you a reading. But you're not doing ohms. You get it?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Measure volts DC. Right? Because this thing works with voltage. There's a little transformer in it that increase the voltage. Okay? But it's volts that works with DC. That's why it's VDC. Right? You don't measure now ohms, you measure volts DC. Okay? Right. Because this thing pushes that voltage into the system. Right? Are we clear on this? So
Yes, ma'am.
it's important. You know that. Okay. Right. Do we have to go over that again? Or are we clear?
Yeah, ma'am.
Clear. Right.
Applicate.
Now, remember we started with a level multimeter, with then to the level. Okay. Now, the next test we are doing the LPDs. ELU. That is unit. Now, for this one we need power. So we have to switch on. Otherwise we cannot do the test. Sam says the first one is the first test. That's the first test. The second one is done with the loop test or a plug test. This is also called a loop test. Okay? Right. Always make sure the dialer is on 0. Right, then plug it in. Now the power is on. So because the wires are
The faults are on. So it says one of the panel to right and one. So it says right here on the panel and then another fault. Manual item 1 fault. When I switch it, it's 3 faults. So by 3 tests, the panel right, light your on fault. Release. Light your sleeve. Release. Light your stance. Release. Repass.
let's check from
In the level. Motor level. Somewhere else. As in situation, one of these in the lens and right. And the other was in the back. Okay, man.
someone give me a flip. Put hold on it. Right. So the second one we conduct with the plug tester or the loop tester. That name is also a loop tester. Actually not a loop tester, sorry, it's actually a polarity tester. Sorry, loop tester is called. Right, so that is actually the polarity tester. Okay. Now, why is it called a polarity tester? Is to make sure that the polarities are right. Your neutral is where it's supposed to be, the light is where it's supposed to be, and the earth is where it's supposed to be. Hence, you find there's indications on the meter, right? That tells you if you have two lights on what is the source of the problem. If there's one, what is the reason? So all this is speculative. Okay. Now, the most important thing to remember is that if you don't have three lights on you cannot conduct the test. Because this thing will not trip the heavy. You can just two lights on one light. You have to have all three lights on. Okay? Now, remember what I said in the beginning. The selector must be on 0. Okay? And then you start off from 0 towards 30 milliamps. Okay? Now, in that book of sense, it says to you that leakage unit, when you do the test, it should not exceed what? 30 million.
Yes.
Now, you don't have to jump all at once to answer. You don't have to rush all at once to answer. Okay. Now, if you read the document in front of you, those things are also written. 30 million is also written. Okay? You get that test a few pages on. Okay? You get the unit test also a few pages on. Now, when you do the test, after you have done the fresh test, you get to this one with the plug tester, or we have another name for it. What is the other name? Polarity test. But you start by 0 and you turn the dial to the next selection. Then press. Then to the next and press. Then to the next and press. Until it trips. You get it? So you start by 0. Then trip in there. Okay, that one. So start by 0, I'm repeating myself. Then you go to the next and press. The next, press. Until press. Now, SAN says you have to repeat the test. So in other words, SAN says you switch back and now SAN says the following. You do the next test with 50% of the tripping limit. Now for those of you who don't know what 50% is, SAN says you must do half the tripping limit. So if he has tripped at 30, you go to 50. 50 is half. If he has tripped at 20, you go to
10.
10. That's how you repeat the test. Okay? Now, we move there, and then we repeat the test with the power. Because you can't do it without a power.
Yes,
So
yes.
you have to first switch back. So then you take it to the half and you press. Now, SANs continue to say, if it trips again down, you have half the tripping rate. Then that unit is faulty. Not the plug, not the tester, the unit itself. Because when you started, you went past that selection and it didn't trip. Now when you, after it trips, you take it back there, it trips, it says there's something wrong with the unit.
Yes.
You get it? Because remember, this test is not about the plug or the tester, it's about the because he is the one that is actually protecting the whole installation. So therefore, we need to make sure that he operates correctly. Because if he doesn't, somebody will die in that house or in that building. Because if he doesn't trip when he's supposed to trip, somebody can die. So it's crucial to know that the test is about it, this unit. It's not about this plug. And now, by the way, this test is conducted by every socket output, not only one.
Oh,
So you go to the next one, in the next room, and the next, in the next room, you get it. And what it does by the first room should do the same by the second and third and the fourth, right? Because you can't just do it by one socket outlet and then you're okay. No? Because somebody could have wired the thing wrong in the other bedroom and swap the wires around. Okay? Because you get people who are more clever than others. No? Who says, no, it doesn't matter what one I put where. No? I can sort of put the live here by F, it's also right. Or I can put him here by neutral and neutral there by live, as long as all of them are here. Yeah? So it's crucial that you go to each socket in the installation. Now remember, when I do it, I only do it with on the one socket. Right? But it's important that you know this. That when you do an installation, if there's 100 sockets, you have to go through all 100. You get it?
Yes, no.
Yeah. It's important to know that. Okay. So that was the attribute. The last test is the polarity test. The polarity test now, guys, is not done with this, but it's done again with the multimeter. Right? But we have also now the power of that. Okay. And how is this test conducted? The multimeter is put on buzzer, not on buzzer. Then we measure from the bottom of the breaker. Yeah? From the bottom of the breaker to, if it's the light, go to the light. If it's the socket, I normally have a plug here. So if it's the socket, we will go from there and we go here. Now why is it not buzzing? It shows there that there's a resistance. Nonetheless, it's still doing what it's supposed to do. Right now, I have to switch this off. What is it?
Yeah.
Right now, SANS says it should make and break. Now, what does SANS mean with make and break? When you switch on, you make it. When you switch off, you break it. Right? You get it? So SANS says it should make and break. In other words, it must switch on and off. When you switch on, it must make. When you switch off, it must break. The teeth is on. When you switch on, when you switch off, you break it. Né? So it must make and break on the socket as well as on the light. So if you put it on the light, it must do the same thing. It must make and break. There it is. So if it's the light, it must make and break. And then if it does something,
Yeah.
then we just do the same thing. We switch off.
Okay.
And then it comes. Okay? Now, that is the last test. Now, you can switch my on. Now,